We found out that there were a lot of porky pies probably told to the royals and even to Harry when they met her, and in order to cover up, oh my God.
A royal nightmare just cracked open, and this time, it's not whispers, not rumors, not tabloids screaming into the void. It's something far darker, something buried, something that was never meant to see daylight. Because deep inside the palace archives, sealed, silent, forgotten, an old diary has allegedly surfaced, and the name circling every line like a shadow, Meghan Markle. And if even a fraction of what's being whispered is true, then the fairy tale that Prince Harry fought the world to protect might have been built on something far more dangerous than love. This wasn't some dramatic discovery under bright chandeliers, no. This began underground, cold, dusty, suffocating. The kind of place where the monarchy hides what it never once remembered. Rows of sealed boxes, forgotten lives, buried truths. And then one box, faded ink, personal effects 2004. Ordinary, harmless, or so it seemed. Until it wasn't, because inside that box, beneath useless trinkets and yellowed papers, lay a leather-bound notebook, worn, decaying, silent. But the moment it was opened, silence turned into something else entirely. Something sharp, something uncomfortable. Because this wasn't a diary filled with tea parties and polite royal notes, this was observation. Cold, precise, unfiltered. And the author? None other than Princess Anne. And that's where things begin to feel off. Because page after page didn't describe royal routines, it described a world hidden from cameras, private yachts, closed door gatherings, power, money, influence. The kind of world where access is currency and where outsiders don't just walk in. They're invited or they find a way in. And then comes the detail that changes everything. A young American woman, no name written, no identity confirmed. But described so specifically, her appearance, her calculated charm, her ability to move through restricted circles, that it starts to feel less like coincidence and more like a target. Dark hair, controlled smile, eyes watching everything, learning, climbing. And here's where the tension tightens, because the timeline, early 2000s. The setting, Mediterranean yacht circuits. The description, uncomfortably aligned with someone who, at that time, was still far from royalty, still navigating a very different world. Now pause, think, is this truth? Is it interpretation? Or is it something in between, the kind of narrative that feeds on just enough detail to feel real? Because the diary doesn't accuse, it observes, and sometimes observation is far more dangerous. Then comes the moment that reportedly shifted everything from curiosity to crisis. Monaco, a private night, no cameras, no witnesses, at least none that would ever speak publicly. And in those pages, there's a description, a scene, a transaction of influence, power exchanged in silence, a necklace, a card, access granted, and then gone. And suddenly, the pieces begin to form a pattern, not confirmed, not proven, but disturbingly consistent. Now imagine this. Imagine being Prince William, standing in a dim office, reading these pages over and over again. Not because you want to believe them, but because you can't ignore how precise they feel. Not because you're shocked, but because something inside you whispers that maybe, just maybe, you've seen signs of this before. Because suspicion is one thing, but a written record, a royal witness, that's something else entirely. And here's where the situation spirals. Because if something like this, even partially, reaches the public, it doesn't just damage one person. It questions everything. The decisions, the judgment, the system that allowed someone to walk through the gates and stand beside the crown. So what do? Call advisors? Issue statements? Control the narrative? No. If the whispers are to be believed, none of that happened. Instead, the diary allegedly moved silently. No announcements, no meetings, just a direct path from the shadows of the archive to one person. Prince Harry. No warning, no preparation, just a moment, a room, and a book placed in front of him with a single crushing command, read. And just like that, everything shifts. Because this isn't about headlines anymore. This isn't about public image. This is personal, painfully personal. The kind of confrontation that doesn't explode loudly, but breaks something quietly, deeply, irreversibly. And here's the detail that lingers like a question you can't shake. What happens when the person you defended against the world becomes the center of a story you can't ignore? What happens when doubt, real doubt, enters a place where there was once absolute trust? Because according to whispers, Harry didn't react the way anyone expected. No shouting, no denial, no immediate defense, just silence. Cold, heavy, unreadable silence. And sometimes silence is louder than anything else because it means something is shifting inside. inside, something breaking, something waking up. And if that's true, if even part of this is real, then the real story isn't the diary. It's not the past. It's not even the allegations. It's what happens next. Because once doubt enters, it doesn't leave easily. And if Harry truly began looking for answers that night, if he started connecting timelines, questioning details, searching for something solid to hold on to, then this wasn't the end of a story. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous. Something that would move from whispers to evidence. Something that wouldn't stay buried. And the most unsettling part, this was only the first crack. Because what came next didn't just raise questions. It allegedly answered them. The silence didn't stay silent. It thickened. It stretched. It turned into something that felt like a storm gathering behind closed doors. The kind of storm that doesn't announce itself with thunder, but with the suffocating stillness that makes every breath feel heavier. Because if the whispers are to be believed, that night didn't end with questions for Prince Harry. It ended with a decision. Not loud, not emotional, cold, calculated. The kind of decision that only comes when something inside finally snaps into clarity. And once that switch flips, there is no going back. Because instead of confronting, instead of arguing, instead of giving anyone a chance to control the narrative, he reportedly did something far more unsettling. He started digging, quietly, methodically, like someone who doesn't want answers but needs proof. And that distinction, that's where everything changes. Because questions can be dismissed, doubt can be denied. But proof doesn't negotiate. The night swallowed the palace in darkness, and somewhere inside those walls, the search allegedly began. Not dramatic, not chaotic, focused, precise. Moving through forgotten storage, old belongings, fragments of a life that existed before titles, before crowns, before the world started watching every step. Because if there was a truth buried anywhere, it wouldn't be in public. It would be hidden in the past. And the past, unlike people, doesn't lie. It just waits to be uncovered. And then comes the detail that feels almost too precise to ignore. Old travel records, flight stubs, dates that align a little too perfectly with those same moments described in the diary attributed to Princess Anne. A gap in time, a blank space where there should have been something, but instead there was nothing. No work, no explanation, just absence. And absence in investigations like this is never empty. It's loud. It demands attention. It begs the question, what was happening in that silence? Because patterns don't form out of nowhere. They reveal themselves slowly, piece by piece. And once you start seeing them, you can't unsee them. Then the search reportedly went deeper. Not just papers, not just dates, physical objects, personal belongings, the kind of things people keep without thinking until those things suddenly mean everything. And here's where the story takes a turn that feels less like speculation and more like something dangerously tangible. A hidden compartment, not obvious, not accidental, something designed to stay unnoticed. And inside, items that, if real, don't just suggest a connection, they create one. Direct, undeniable, a card, exclusive, specific, tied to a place, a time, a world that doesn't open its doors to just anyone. And alongside it, an image, a frozen moment, a snapshot that doesn't explain itself but doesn't need to. Because sometimes a single image can dismantle an entire narrative in seconds. And that's the moment where everything reportedly shifts from doubt to something much harder to ignore. Because if even part of that is accurate, then the story stops being about interpretation. It stops being about what people think. It becomes about what exists. And existence, that's something no amount of explanation can erase. Now imagine the weight of that realization. Not as a headline, not as gossip, but as something personal, something sitting in your hands, something forcing you to confront the possibility that the life you built, the battles you fought, the choices you made might have been based on something incomplete, or worse, something manipulated. Because the most dangerous part of this entire narrative isn't the past being messy, it's the idea that the past was hidden, intentionally, strategically, carefully. And if that's true, then the question isn't just what happened, it becomes why was it hidden? And that question, that's the one that destroys trust. Because trust doesn't collapse in one moment, it erodes. Quietly, until suddenly there's nothing left to hold on to. And according to the whispers swirling around this story, that erosion reached its breaking point not in public, but in private. A confrontation that didn't explode into chaos, but froze into something far more unsettling. Because anger fades, emotion burns out, but cold certainty, that stays. There are claims, unverified, heavily debated, that what followed was not a negotiation, not a dramatic back and forth, but something decisive, immediate, the kind of action that suggest the conclusion had already been reached long before words were spoken. And whether those claims are exaggerated or not, they feed into a narrative that refuses to settle. A narrative that keeps evolving, keeps pulling people in, keeps asking uncomfortable questions. Because at the center of it all is Meghan Markle, a figure who has always divided opinion, always existed in that space between admiration and suspicion, always carried a story that people either defend fiercely or question relentlessly. And that division, it's exactly what makes a situation like this so explosive. Because people don't just react to facts, they react to what they already believe. And that's where things become even more complicated. Because what if some of this is real? What if some of it is distorted? What if the truth sits somewhere in the middle, buried under layers of interpretation, bias, and narrative building? Because that's the reality of stories like this. They don't exist in clean lines, they exist in shadows. And the palace? The palace has always been a place of shadows. Secrets don't just live there, they're protected there, controlled, managed, sometimes even rewritten. Because institutions like that don't survive for centuries by letting every truth walk freely into the light. They survive by choosing which truths matter and which ones disappear. So if something this explosive really did surface, if a document, a record, a piece of evidence threatened to shake the foundation of that carefully controlled image, then the real question isn't just what happened between two people behind closed doors. It's how far the system would go to contain it. Because containment doesn't always look like silence. Sometimes it looks like confusion, contradiction, stories that clash just enough to keep the truth unclear. Because when people don't know what to believe, they stop asking. But here's the problem. This story refuses to fade. It lingers, it circulates, it evolves, because it taps into something deeper than gossip. It taps into curiosity about power, about image, about what really happens behind the scenes of a world that presents itself as flawless. And at the center of it all is a question that still hasn't been answered. What is real? Was there truly a diary that detailed everything so precisely? Were those connections coincidental or intentional? Did a private investigation really unfold behind closed doors? Or is this a narrative built from fragments and speculation? Because until those questions are answered clearly, definitively, this story doesn't end. It just grows. And maybe that's the most unsettling part of all. Because in a world where perception often matters more than truth, sometimes the story that survives isn't the one that's proven. It's the one people can't stop talking about. And this one, it's not going anywhere.